three-person stream today. Not one, not two, but we got all three of us. I've got my guy Suneil back on the show. We've got Marco back here. It's going to be a fun one. Make sure you stay tuned right after this.
Let's go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dominate on 3. 1, 2, 3, dominate.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. It's going to be a fun one today because, like I said, we got three people here. I've got my guy Suneil. I've got Marco with me. How you guys doing, man?
Doing great. How you doing, Suneil?
Fantastic, my man. I'm glad to be with the Dream Team again. I've always wanted to do a stream with you two, but it's never happened. I'm glad we finally made it happen, man.
Yeah.
Bro, Suneil's making dreams come true, man. It's been a dream of mine to have Suneil on the show. You know what I'm saying? So appreciate you, Suneil.
Just mesh it all together in one. Kill Suneil's dream, kill Marco's dream, kill two birds with one stone. Steve-O, 4 minutes late. This is on me. I'm pretty lazy in terms of getting this tweet out, and that's what causes the lateness. So my apologies there. But, you know, the
unacceptable.
49ers,
I agree, bro. It's unacceptable. We'll hold Rohan to it. Unacceptable.
Hold up, Steve-O. 6:02. Did you promote the show is going to start at 5:58?
I mean, that's true. That's true.
Come on, Steve-O.
But, hey, 49ers, really disappointing week one of the preseason. They ended up, losing to the Las Vegas Raiders 34-7. Really just a poor performance all across the board. A lot that came out with it. Suneil, I haven't talked to you since. What was your takeaway when you kind of saw that, whatever you want to call it, of a performance?
Yeah. Look, personally, I didn't overreact to it too much because I just know that, unlike other teams, the level of talent that the 49ers have in their starting 22 and the fall off that there is in their, whatever the rest 22, 53 minus 22 ultimately is going to be, it's just really, really different. So none of these players are ever going to be playing on the field that we saw in the preseason without all pro level talent surrounded around them. That's going to make their job so much more easy. So for me, it's just like, obviously you never want to see your team get obliterated like that. And I understand the point that the Raiders were also playing with their, second and third string and possibly guys that aren't going to make the team as well. But it's just the level of talent that the 49ers have that make the game so much easier for anybody else that's playing with them. For me, I didn't read too much into it because even some of the guys that we wanted to see in that second string, they weren't even there. Guys like Drake Jackson, guys like there was a few other names that didn't play either. Like I wanted to see Beal play and all that kind of stuff. So for me, obviously it would be great if everybody looked awesome and all that, but that's just what we like. We were talking about dreams earlier in the stream. That's just a dream to think that you can go, 30, 40 deep with like really, really big guys that could make game-changing plays. It's just, that's not the way that it is. To have 22 guys that I think play at a very, very high level, which the 49ers have, and probably even, 26, 27 guys, I think that's ultimately what the 49ers are looking at. So I think I didn't read too much into it, but once again, what do I know?
I mean, I think that what you're saying is true. In that, does it matter as much as people might perceive it to be? No. To me, what the preseason ultimately is an indictment on the 49ers' depth. And I think that's where my biggest concern is. When we talk about the depth of this team, a lot of people have pointed out how not only is this team top-heavy and it's one of the strongest teams at the top, this team also had a strong amount of depth. And I think Sunday, unfortunately showed that the 49ers might not be as strong depth-wise at certain positions. Defensive line, an area of strength, and an area where a lot of people not only point out the top-level talent, but also the depth. Thought that the depth, didn't look as good as they normally do. tight end. When you hear about the recurring issues around Cam Latu and really just the overall lack of production from the backup units starting from the beginning of training camp, that's something where you do have some concerns about. Other positions might include, even linebacker. With the amount of depth that they had at that room, there were certainly flashers, but there's still some of those players where you hope they could make a roster spot, still seeing ups and downs. I thought a lot of positions of depth that the 49ers might have, been perceived to be stronger at didn't look as good against the Raiders. Marco, what did you think about that?
I mean, I thought it was. I agree with you guys to the point where I think it's a testament to the depth of the 49ers, right? So it's interesting because when I see people on 49ers Twitter talk about, oh, the 49ers have the deepest roster in the NFL, XYZ, it always leads to me where I'm like, there's times where even last year I forgot who it was, I had a conversation and we got into an in-depth conversation. I want to say it was Jordan Elliott. We were talking about that Philadelphia Eagles last year. And he was saying how the 49ers and the Eagles are pretty deep. And I had explained, I personally think the Eagles are deeper. When you look at their offensive line, they have dudes who are on their reserve that could start for most teams. Their defensive line is extremely deep. When you look at our team, we're very top heavy. Unfortunately, the 49ers are very top heavy with 8 all pros leading the way, which is phenomenal. Like, that's extremely deep to have 8 all pros on your roster at some point. But to me, the biggest thing is the depth, right? Like, we saw it against the Raiders. Now, I don't care that they got blown out 34-7. I really don't. I do think preseason is to get you ready for the regular season in the sense of getting into a rhythm of the weeks, right? Like the first couple of days during the week, you have that Monday off. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are your prep days. Friday, you're off to travel or you have that day off for meetings and stuff. But just watching some of it, if we lose a starting D lineman or starting offensive lineman for a week or two, we might fall a game because of that. Like, realistically, the depth isn't there for both of those positions. So for me, I thought it was more so a test to the 49ers depth in terms of their interior offensive defensive line. I didn't think it was much more than that.
And I just disagree with you guys. And maybe our definition of depth is different. I agree. Like, if a Trent Williams goes down for the season, we're probably done for. If a guy like CMC goes down for the season, we're done for. If a Nick Bosa goes down for the season, we're done for. Fred Warner. There's certain positions like if we lose them for the season, we're done for. However, I look at the depth as the 49ers have rookies that are going to be starters in 2-3 years. We see that the 49ers hit on that quite a bit.
Suneil, which rookies are you talking about, though? Because the only rookie that showed that they looked the best was Brown and the back end. And even then, he didn't look great.
But when did a rookie look good ever? Remember 2 years ago, Aaron Banks. What was the talk when we were in preseason and in training camp and all that kind of stuff? Oh, my God, the 49ers got this guy in the second round. It's a bust. It's all of the stuff that we are hearing right now. We heard this about Aaron Banks. Aaron Banks shows up in year 2 as a starter, and all of a sudden our left guard position is situated for the next decade. So this is what I'm saying. Like, the rookies and all those guys, I'm just like, for whatever reason, the 49ers do some magic to them, and all of a sudden the next year, a Hufanga goes from some guy who's like shaky, all this kind of stuff, to an all-pro, right? So to me, I don't think we should be judging the rookies because the 49ers have proven, I give them the benefit of the doubt that they're going to develop these guys.
So if go through, just
let me finish this off real quick.
Go for it.
But when I'm looking at the depth of what the other guys, right, the guys that are going to be rotational players and all that kind of stuff, the game that they saw, the game that they played with the Raiders is going to be a completely different football game when Nick Bosa's around you, when Javon Hargrave's around you, when Ark Armstead's around you, when, the offensive line is going to be much different when all the starters, 80% of them are returning guys. So that continuity is there. And McKivitz has been on the team for the past, 3-4 years developing in this system. So to me, I look at it and I'm saying the depth that we need aren't guys that are going to be able to come in and be full-time starters. We don't have that. The Eagles have that. Guys that could come in, replace a guy, and not skip a beat. I'm not saying we have that type of depth, but I do think we have guys that could come in for a game or two and we don't miss a beat. We could still win games with guys being nicked up here and there. But yeah, I agree. We're top heavy, but the top heavy of us isn't just in contract. It's in elite talent. So I just think that the way this team is made up, we don't necessarily need those guys that are going to just jump in and be starters week one. That's just the point I was trying to make.
No, I totally get what you're saying. I totally understand that in terms of when you plug in a guy next to Bosa on the opposite end, he's going to have more one-on-one matchups, which is totally understandable. But now, even when we're talking rookies, right? Out of the top 3 picks to the 49ers picks, right, rookie-wise, Jair Brown, solid. He played good. Didn't make any mistakes out of his assignments. Jake Moody missed 2 bad field goals, which now it's the preseason, so I'm not gonna kill Jake Moody for it. You had Kaimru Latu's had the worst training camp out of any player and had a fumble last week. Your top 3 picks, 3 players in the third round who should be contributors this season and most likely will become starters next year. Well, Jake Moody's already a starter, but those 3 guys, they didn't play well. So like those picks are important. Now I'm not judging rookies and stuff by what they do their rookie year. I thought Aaron Banks was a solid pick when they drafted him. I remember I was on with David Lichty, and I told him that's a solid pick. I really liked it. So I totally get what you're saying in the sense of when you throw guys in with all pros, the pressure and the weight gets lifted from their shoulders and put onto the other guys. So I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and Marco, once again, to your point, you went down the third round picks. That's still par for the course for the 49ers. Look at last year's third round picks, right? Who was it? We had
and
TDP, Danny Gray. Those guys are still question marks. Go the year before. Trey Sermon, not even on the team anymore. Go a year before. Ambry Thomas, maybe he'll make the team, maybe he'll not. Go the year before. Jalen Hurd, third round pick. So it's like the 49ers are par for the course that they're going to pick some third round picks that just don't turn into anything. Luckily for the 49ers, we got a guy by the name of Adam Peters that knows how to pick fourth round and below, that bails out a lot of these first, second, and third round picks that don't always necessarily turn out to be the players that we are. So that's what I'm saying is like, I think a lot of people are just having the same arguments that we have every single year about draft picks, about what the team looks like in certain moments. And then all of a sudden we get into the season and it's the same thing. Like we were complaining about the picks last year. We were complaining about the picks 2 years ago. But all of a sudden, 2 years, 3 years down the line, now they're our favorite players and we're buying their jerseys and they're turning into like stopgaps.
I disagree though. I disagree because if you look at those players that we did miss on, right? If it's a player that's able to contribute, is our depth after the top guys as weak? I don't think so. So for me, like for example, on some of the top guys, I'm not gonna lie, like Hufanga, his rookie year, I thought he should have been starting. Like he was by far better than Jaquaski Tart. I thought by far. So like on some of the players, I do get what you're saying, but I feel like if they would have hit on some of those players rather than like a Jalen Hurd, right? Gone. Trey Sermon, gone. If they would have hit on those players to be quality, not even starters, just quality backups, we wouldn't be as thin in terms of our second and third string.
Yeah, but that's all wishful thinking. What team always hits? You know what I mean? That's just nature of the beast. But if you look at it, okay, they missed on Ambry Thomas in the third round. But that same draft.
Showing.
But what I'm saying, let's just say he didn't turn into all that. But then they hit on Diamador Lenore, who's now a starter, right? They missed on Trey Sermon, but they hit on Elijah Mitchell. They missed on, Jalen Hurd, but they hit on, I'm forgetting the name, 7th round pick in Tennessee, Jawan Jennings. So it's like, I kind of would challenge you on the 49ers haven't found depth because Samuel Womack is a depth piece that they hit on I think Luter could be a depth piece that they hit on. I think Beal's going to be a depth piece that they hit on. I know Rohan, you're big on Kalia Davis. He's going to be, a depth piece. So to me, it's like, yeah, it would be nice because obviously in the third round, usually the talent level is higher, the name recognition's higher and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think it's hurt the 49ers depth because they've always been one of the deeper teams. So, and I just think we haven't necessarily seen those guys yet. But I think as this preseason moves on into the regular season, if we trust the system, obviously we've just seen year after year that the 49ers will develop these guys to be something, and I just think it's still going to happen.
Now, I'll say this because I do think that there's a discrepancy with what we're both talking about here. And here's the way that I view it. Suneil, you pointed out when you spoke about depth, talking about the rookies and how it's important to analyze not only their rookie season, but also how they develop, because that's truly the count of whether they hit or not. To me, though, when I talk about depth, I'm looking in the short term. I'm not looking at rookies and their progression. I'm more so looking at, look, if a player goes down, and I'm not even thinking for the season, if Trent Williams goes down, is there going to be a replacement where you can get away for 2 games and not be hurt? And that's the thing. Whereas, you could be talking about a guy like Leroy Watson and saying, look, this guy is a promising guy. He could project to be a starter or at least a swing guy in 2 years. Well, unfortunately, in this season, that doesn't necessarily matter. And so to me, when I point out depth, I'm not only looking at the rookies, I'm looking at overall just the players on the team behind the starters who can you count on them to pick up the slack. And of course, in general, in the entire NFL, there's going to be a drop off between the starters and the depth, but the drop off between starters and depth for some teams is less than drop off between starters and depth for other teams. And ultimately, that challenge sometimes ends up saving teams on their route to a Super Bowl compared to other teams because of how well insulated they were. My main point from the beginning was that personally, I thought the 49ers were more deep than I saw when I watched them play, both in the preseason and in training camp. That's the initial takeaway, in that we can talk about guys like, Kalia Davis, you pointed out, some other guys on the defensive line, Robert Beal. I don't think they're contributors this year. At least at the moment, I don't think they're contributors. It might take a little bit more time to build up. Davis has been out for a majority of the offseason, still rehabbing, it appears. Beal has also suffered an injury of his own, so he's expected to return to practice. He might not even make the 53. So, I think overall we can talk about development, but I think that that's a whole nother topic than talking about depth and how they'll impact the 49ers this season.
But then once again, I think like we're creating stuff that we've already seen the 49ers prove year in, year out. So you mentioned a scenario. Trent Williams goes down for a few games, right? I think if he goes down for the season, we're done for. But let's just say it's a few games. The year that Colton McKivitz stepped up and jumped into that left tackle position, at what point throughout the season were people like, we have a lot of depth at left tackle, Colton McKivitz can jump in and be a starter?
That's a good argument. But the point is that right now we're worse.
It's not there,
worse.
But
what
I'm saying is,
and Colton McKivitz didn't look great in that game either. He held up. He didn't look great, and now we're worse, right?
But that's what I'm saying. I don't know if we're worse, or if we're going back into that same prisoner of the moment position where it's like, because Colton McKivitz didn't look good in the preseason that year. He wasn't talked about. Nobody was like, we have a lot of depth because we have Colton McKivitz. It's pretty much like this. It's like the Leroy Davis type situation. What I'm saying is, on their own, when they're with 4 other guys that are also trying to figure out, may or may not make the team, everybody's not going to look that great. But even if let's say Trent Williams goes out and somebody jumps in, right? Leroy Davis jumps in, having Aaron Banks next to you versus whomever was it, Jason Poe next to you, like it was in this game, that's a much different game that you're playing at that point, in my eyes. So I just think we can't necessarily really judge them off of one playoff game, and 2, when there's absolutely none of the other talent in the game with them. That's just what I'm saying, is like, I don't think we've ever looked at it and been like, dang, we're really deep based off of the first playoff game. I don't know. You guys, if you remember a time where you looked at the 49ers team based off of the first playoff game and were like, these guys are going to be studs.
Preseason, Suneil,
Preseason, I'm sorry. Preseason.
You're good. No, but I totally agree with both of you in the sense of, it is just week 1 of preseason. Normally when you do, for example, last year, Aaron Banks struggled in the preseason. As soon as he was put next to Trent Williams, much better, right? So I totally get what you're saying. But also agree with Rohan in the sense of, if Trent does go down for a week, that depth that was there 2 years ago when McKivitz had to play, it's no longer there because that's your starting right tackle. So that's no longer there. There is no legit swing tackle. Now, during that season, we could have said, yeah, maybe we might have a legit swing tackle. No one talked about it because Colton McKivitz is Colton McKivitz. He's not I don't think he's a starting right tackle, legit starting right tackle. I think he's a placeholder for the time being. So I don't know. I get what both you guys are saying because I do agree with Rohan. When I think of depth, I think of can someone come in and play now rather than in next year, right? Like I totally agree. Like with the rookies, you're looking at them like, okay, what can they provide for me this year, special teams wise? But next year, can they step in and become a starter or a quality backup? So I get what both of you guys are saying. I think it's more so two different viewpoints of how we view depth. So I totally get what both of you guys are saying because Suneil, you look at it as is my roster deep to the where I could have guys. I don't have to resign a guy after this year, and I can just replace him with a second year player. Versus Rohan and myself, we look at it as, you know what, if Arik Armstead goes down for a game or two, what defensive lineman steps in, right? Like that's kind of how like depth we're looking. But I totally agree.
No,
Preseason
but
game one isn't much to really over exaggerate or overcompensate on.
and I guess my point, and we could move on after this, is like judging that. I don't think we can fairly judge that because let's say Arik Armstead goes down, whoever jumps in, whether it's Kinlaw, whether it's Kalia Davis or whomever, right? Playing along the defensive line that we just saw them in the first game preseason against the Raiders is much different than what they're going to look like when they're between Javon Hargrave and Nick Bosa.
I don't know, man. Kinlaw been kind of bad his entire time.
Suneil, here's the way that I look at it. I do value the argument that you make about playing with better players makes you better, but I also do think that it's very important on how that individual player plays. Because when you look at it, if Kinlaw's in the game, what are they going to do? They're going to run right at Kinlaw. Or they're going to go right at Kinlaw. You can't avoid if they're going to target you. Same as if a cornerback goes out and a new cornerback comes in the game, what are they going to do? They're going to throw right at that cornerback. If a left tackle's in the game, if you have a new starting left tackle, what are they going to do? They're going to place a good defensive end on the edge and have him go one-on-one against that left tackle. So I do think it's important, when you see, oh, yeah, of course. And if Aaron Banks goes next to Trent Williams versus Leroy Watson, he's obviously better against with Trent Williams on his side. But it's still important for that player specifically, whoever it is, to play well in order for the 49ers to work. It can't just be, themselves.
So this is a good comment, Dusty Gold. Brad Graham film study on Aim Manning was blown away by his play at left tackle. Played with the skill of a veteran. Good plays. I disagree though. I don't think he's making the roster. I think he's on
the uphill battle. He doesn't make the roster, but I think he's a solid practice squad guy.
Absolutely. Played well. So at that point, if he's not making the roster, it doesn't matter what kind of film he's putting on because if he's not on the roster, the first guy up isn't going to be Manning if someone goes down. So like that's kind of how I look at it as well too. Great tape. I love what Manning's done. I feel like since he's gotten to the 49ers, he's played well in training camp and in the first preseason game. But if you're not on the roster and you're on the practice squad, it's kind of hard to say, well, that guy will just step in because when you cut him, he might get clean. So it's kind of hard to really say, you know what I mean? But week one, who were your guys? Trey Sermon just scored a touchdown for Philly. Okay. I see you, 49er legend.
He going ball, man. He going to ball in Philly. He going to make that roster. He going to ball.
Or 49ers blown pick. Damn. We're getting there. No, but let's talk about the preseason game. What players stood out to y'all? Because I know a couple of players had to stand out to you guys in terms of what you guys are looking for, or after you watched the all 22, who stood out?
Rohan, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can. I had a couple. If we're talking offense, there were two that stood out specifically. Ronnie Bell. He had one drop, obviously, the key drop. But I thought, for a rookie, you wanted someone to look good. And Bell, even on the times where he didn't get the ball, was consistently open. Me and Marco, we broke down the all 22. I thought there were two more reps where Ronnie Bell could have gotten targeted, where he was next up in the progression, could have gotten targeted. Quarterback didn't let it rip. Ended, though, with 3 catches, 58 yards, a nice go ball for 37 yards. I thought that, that was a key win for Ronnie Bell, where he was able to get by the corner, make a solid catch on a good throw from Darnold. But overall, you want to see things like that from receivers, especially, when a guy like Ronnie Bell was a starter, essentially, in this game. Good to see how Ronnie Bell, worked, and also cool to see, while he didn't necessarily fully impress me as a returner, he's at least some depth that you have at a returner spot, or at least some competition there. liked him though as a receiver, despite the one huge drop that he had.
For me, Marco, the guy that stood out was a guy that I've been saying is going to be a stud for a long time, and I've been made a fool year after year after year, because right when Ambry Thomas was drafted, I put a video up that this is the steal of the draft. This guy's going to come in and be the quarterback of the future, and it didn't happen that year. Didn't happen last year. But this is the year, Marco. This is the year Ambry Thomas is going to play his weight. All that stuff we saw him as a 3-year starter at Michigan, Ambry Thomas showed out. I think that he's continued to show out even in practice and the joint practices. It's nice to see him compete. And I think, he this offseason worked really closely with Mooney Ward over, I think they were practicing in Dallas. And I think it's paid off, and you've started to see a little bit more aggression in his game, and him not being beat in the same ways he was being beat previously in his past 2 seasons. So that was the guy on defense that really stood out to me, was Ambry Thomas.
You heard it there first, man. Hey, he's a big. When you start off with that kind of enthusiasm, that kind of optimism, you're a big Ambry Thomas fan. You must be a Michigan fan as well, are you?
Not necessarily, but I was just big on Ambry Thomas. Well, I'm a Harbaugh fan because I thought he was a great coach for the 49ers as well. But
so yeah, I like that one. It's easy to bash Ambry Thomas. It's easy to go there for a lot of people. For me, the guy that stood out to me, it was interesting because I wasn't expecting him to stand out when I was watching the film. But Taylor Hawkins, I was very surprised. He was coming down, fitting the run very well, shooting gaps. I was like, whoa, this guy's playing like he wants to make a team. And I think he's making a case. I think you could argue that he's young enough, he's versatile enough to give you the depth on special teams. He could be an ace in terms of a gunner. He could take George Odom's spot. And it sounds crazy because George Odom is a legit special teamer, but when you think of safety as well, I think Hawkins provides a little bit more as a safety, and I think he could be a good special teamer. And if you have not, make sure you guys go over to So Real Suneil's show. It's So Real Sports Talk, my man, right?
Yep.
So Real Sports Talk TV. Make sure you guys go there. You guys hit the subscribe button. Make sure you guys go to Rohan Chakravarthi's personal channel, and make sure you guys are subscribed to Clutch Gene Sports because I don't know why, bro, but I heard that noise earlier and it's been stuck in my head all day. So,
clearly,
I've done it 25 times during us being on. But now, what players stood out in a bad way? So, in the terms of they didn't look good.
I'll go with my first person because once again, a guy I was really high on, and maybe I do like Michigan, Marco, because this is another Michigan guy, and that's Jake Moody, right? So I think that Jake Moody is going to give us I think Jake Moody is going to be a player that makes it easier to win for the 49ers because of the strength of his leg. I think it's going to give Shanahan options.
Time out.
Oh, no, don't ice him, man. He gonna miss. Don't ice him. He gonna miss.
I never miss. But what I'm saying is
I'm kidding.
But what I'm saying is I expected him to, and not necessarily expected him, but I wanted him to go out and really, perform and do something, have that wow moment, because obviously a lot of people have been down on how high he got picked. But the saving grace is somebody put up a stat on Twitter that Justin Tucker, who is the best kicker ever in the history, possibly, he went 1 for 4 in his first ever preseason game. So he ended up turning into, one of the greatest clutch kickers in the game. So maybe this is par for the course for Jake Moody. Have a really terrible week 1 preseason game, and then, move forward and become the clutch player with a super strong leg that we need him to be.
I mean, that's a good pick. Jake Moody was on my list of stock dropping. Another one, I'm going to go with a pair of players because they're at the exact same position. Let's go defensive tackle. Javon Kinlaw, Kevin Givens. Both of them make the list this week because the defense in the run game was terrible. And really, why was it terrible? Because there were 3 players that the Raiders chose to consistently run upon. You can look at the statistics. The Raiders didn't run for more than 4 yards per carry on the day, but they ran the ball 35 times. When you have a team scoring 34 points, running the ball 35 times, it's not a good sign for your offense. It normally means that the opposing or defense, because it normally means the opposing offense is dictating the pace of the game the entire time. And that was something that definitely happened this week. I have both of them on there because they just didn't show an ability to consistently stop the run. And the issue was there wasn't much aggression at times from the linebackers. And so when you see the defensive tackles get pushed out, what does that mean? An open running lane for the running backs to get to the second level. And if the linebackers aren't charging forward and trying to make a play at the line of scrimmage, they're consistently getting to the second level, which was a recurring theme this past weekend. So those 2 make my list.
Absolutely. I think Rohan, you took 2 of the guys that I was gonna go after, but now I'm gonna have to change it up a little bit. I definitely thought Kevin Givens was probably the worst player on the field on defense with the second unit by far. Like it wasn't even close. There was a play I was watching where I believe it was McCurdy Ball was gonna fit a run, and Kevin Givens gets blown into him and completely throws McCurdy Ball off his tracks because that's how far he got blown off the ball. Now that's terrible. Now it kind of makes you question: can Kevin Givens make this roster by just being a pass rusher? Because he is not that great of a pass rusher at defensive tackle, and he doesn't provide anything in the run defense. But for me, defensively, I thought the linebacking core, for the most part, in terms of Curtis Robinson, Demetrius Flanagan-Fells, and there was one other that I pointed out. But just those 2 in general, those 2 stick out more off the top of my head. Those 2 played pretty bad. Now, it also is impacted by defensive tackle play. When defensive tackle play is bad, your defensive tackle's job in the run game is to keep your linebackers free. And they did a terrible job, but also I think Curtis Robinson and Demetrius Flanagan-Fells had a timid trigger to shoot gaps. I thought they also had a timid approach to offensive linemen when they engaged to disengage. It kind of felt like they let the offensive lineman come to them instead of attacking and disengaging. So I would definitely say those 2 linebackers to go with the other guys you just mentioned.
No, those are all good points. And I mean, there was probably more down than up this past week, but week 1 is now out of the way. The focus is now on week 2. And one of the biggest questions that still hasn't been answered as the week comes to an end is Brock Purdy and his availability to start in this next preseason game. Kyle Shanahan said he does not know whether the starters are going to play in week 2 or to what extent the starters will play. And Matt Mayoko put out an article today that it's seeming more and more unlikely that Purdy will suit up in preseason week 2.
So
what are your guys' thoughts on that?
When Mayoko came out with that was before Kyle spoke to KNBR, I believe. And Kyle came and spoke to KNBR and said he's going to try to get Purdy in the starters 1 to 2 series if possible. Like, he's like, if I can. Like, so he kind of said, like, I might do it, I might not do it, but it does sound like they will get 1 to 2 series. So I know that came out right after Matt Mayoko's article, and then Matt Mayoko went on and was like, I apologize, I spoke too soon. I didn't realize that Kyle was going to plan on playing them.
Yeah, so that's the case. Seems like they might play 1 to 2 series. How do you guys like, though, the handling of Brock Purdy? Because I know Marco and I had some certain thoughts last week when Purdy did not play. How do you like the handling of Purdy this preseason?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little tricky just because he is coming off of that injury. I think that if he was fully healthy, I would say the handling of him has been terrible, right? Because he's still a guy that needs reps, as many reps as possible, just because he's such a young quarterback. And even though he had, a really great run last season, there's still a lot of things he needs to work on. And you can only work on that through the game. But obviously, I think there's some restrictions as far as him not being fully cleared till last week, I guess, as far as no rest anymore. I think I would be disappointed if he didn't play at least one series, if not 2 series, in the preseason game, because of all the stuff that's coming out in the media about his practices, right? The the whole plagued with interceptions and pick sixes and stuff like that. I think that regardless of that, I don't know how much I feed into that, but I think it is important that usually is a sign that, hey, maybe we need some more reps as far as like full game speed, even if it is preseason. So I would like to see him and the starters playing for 1 or 2 seasons. If not anything, I think that the 49er fan base at this point just needs something to look good, right? Because I think right now, the 49er fan base isn't handling its emotions very, very well. We're ripping ourselves at the seam because we're not hearing a lot of positive out of training camp because, obviously I think this quarterback situation has taken a mind of its own. So I think going out there, having 2 series with guys like CMC, Trent Williams, I don't think Trent Williams will play, but like guys like CMC,
if Trent Williams don't play, you don't play Brock Purdy.
You think so?
You got to play him with the full starters. That's my personal opinion.
I mean, I'll let you finish and then I'll go.
Well, I just think that then if it is 1 series, right? If you could only trust that, you don't want to hurt a guy like Trent Williams, so you put him in there for 1 series. I think it'd just be nice to see a nice completion to Brandon Ayuk, see him highball somebody, moss somebody, just so that there's some like good feelings with the 49ers are like, look, even though our backups might not be playing the way we want them to play, we still got a squad that's still really, really good. And I think it's also important, Marco, I'll pass it off to you after this. Kyle Shanahan has been habitually a guy that hasn't started very, very strong when it comes to the beginning of the season. And maybe some of these decisions to not play people and all that kind of stuff. I know it's tricky because you always got to balance injuries versus, getting somebody prepared. But I personally would want to see the starters at least play 1 series just so that we can kind of see what that looks like versus, all the negativity that we've been hearing, this whole offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. So now you said if Trent Williams doesn't go, the reason why I say if Trent Williams doesn't go, you don't play Brock is because if the big concern is his health, you don't play him if that's the case, right? Like
that makes sense.
If you let him get hit and you have a technically it'd be your 3rd string tackle because your left tackle, your right tackle is your number 2, and then your 3rd best tackle is technically your swing tackle. And if you let that happen, who is it? Jalen Moore? Jesus Christ! Like,
is he healthy?
Yeah, Jalen Moore's healthy. He played last week.
Oh, okay.
So if you let Jalen Moore block his blind side and you get him hurt, oh my God! I think Kyle Shanahan would have the entire fan base with pitchforks, forks at the 49er facility after him immediately. Like, so for me, I think you do play Brock Purdy sometime this preseason because now I totally get the interceptions, and I've been a very big person on social media talking about the interceptions, how I think they're concerned. Now, when I say concerned, people take me like I'm saying, oh my God, he's terrible. He's throwing interceptions in camp. No, it's not what I'm saying. Now, what I mean by this is in camp, if you're throwing these interceptions, it's concerning because it could lead to the regular season. So I think Brock Purdy deserves to play because it allows him to, okay, now I get to go against a different defense with different speeds. I get to see how different and what I could fit the ball into differently because our defense plays at a different speed, man. It plays at a speed that is above everyone else.
Right.
So you're constantly – that's why it could be a reason why he's throwing interceptions as well. So that could be what's concerning is it's just the defense is so good. So that's why I would play him. Also, he's only played 7 games. There's been more film on him. Now, when there's more film on someone, you know what happens? A regression usually happens for every player. No matter what position, a regression happens.
Hence that sophomore slump. That's what a lot of people talk about.
Exactly. So for me, I think you have to play him at least a series or 2. Now, what happens if he doesn't play well? Is it just preseason if it doesn't play well? Like, that's where, like, where do we – so if he does play well, should we set the boundary right now? Like, what is the boundary? What are the expectations? What are the grading scale, right? Because everyone's been talking about, it's just – I mean, Trey Lance was terrible during the preseason game, right? If Brock it doesn't look like great or spectacular or good in the preseason, is it still like do we still evaluate him like that we are Trey Lance, or do we say it's just the preseason?
I mean, I think people should be fair if they if they are going at Trey Lance and making judgments on him off of a preseason game, those same people should be making the same judgments off of Brock Purdy. It can't be good for one, but not good for the other. But personally, my take on the quarterbacks, and I'll pass it to you, Rohan. I don't think any of these quarterbacks on our rosters is a franchise quarterback. I said it very early on last season. That the reason why the 49ers offense looked really, really good was the insertion of CMC. I think this offense goes with how long CMC is healthy and on the roster. He makes the game so much easier for anybody playing quarterback that even Jimmy Garoppolo went off on a historic 4-game, no interception type run that he has never done in the history of ever in his career. So to me, I'm not the reason why I'm not too worried about how good these quarterbacks look, once again, is kind of to my previous point about not too worried about the depth. The type of talent that the 49ers have make the game so much easier that you don't need necessarily a super high-level player for most of the season. Obviously, when we're talking about Super Bowl and NFC Championship games, that's a little bit different. But for the regular season, at least, and to be, very, very good in the playoffs, they just make the game easier. So that's why I think, unless CMC is back there and the full offense is back there, I don't think any of these quarterbacks will really look good, Marco or Rohan. I think that we just have very average quarterback play in that room that looks a lot better because of Kyle Shanahan's scheme and the amount of talent that's around them.
I mean, first of all, I agree with your point. After watching this off season, going through training camp, my main conclusion was that I honestly am not confident in either of the 3 quarterback options for the 49ers. I didn't feel confident in either of their play. I thought it was too inconsistent, and I'm not sure, whether how much I can, trust either of these 3 quarterbacks come the Super Bowl. And I like your point, Suneil, how it's not necessarily needed until the big games come. But personally, I'm only looking at the big games. So the 49ers need to reach that big game standard, and I don't know if they've got the quarterback at the moment for them to be able to accomplish their true end goal. But speaking specifically about Brock Purdy in the preseason, I had a different take than Marco this last week, coming week 1, in that I didn't mind that he didn't play in week 1. I honestly didn't. And the reason that I gave before it was, to me, the most important thing for the 49ers and Brock Purdy was those joint practices. That's what Kyle Shanahan said too. And the reason that I value the joint practices a lot more than I value the preseason game is because you had the ones going against the ones for about 75% of the time, especially on that second day, where Purdy got about 40 reps and the other quarterbacks got below 10 reps combined. Because that's where you want to see, your ones going against other ones. That's where you can truly see is how does Purdy play against a different defense. And that's why I did share some concern when you heard about the 3 interceptions, when you heard about that. I don't think you can dismiss practice interceptions. Now, do I think they're as valuable as real game interceptions? No, because you're obviously wanting to try different things. But even Kyle Shanahan said it himself. Interceptions are interceptions. Regardless of what you're trying, regardless of whether you're looking to try and fit things in, there's still an interception. Regardless, right? Unless it's a drop or something, if it's on the quarterback, that's still a negative play. So I value what the joint practices were. Didn't care that he played in the preseason. However, I did say that is only for week 1. The 49ers don't have joint practices this week. They don't have joint practices next week. I want to see Purdy play in the preseason at least one time be it this tomorrow or be it next week. If Purdy does not play in the preseason, that's a major failure on the 49ers part. Not only in first of all, not having your starting quarterback play at all, but 2, he needs to get reps. He needs to get the reps in some capacity or another with the top offense. And to not give him those reps, especially after the recovery he's gone through, where the primary thing to get back to speed is getting as many possible reps against a different defense with the first team offense, then you're not doing right on Purdy's part to prepare him for the beginning of the season when these outlandish takes that could occur come through. Now, Marco, to your point, to cap my statement off, what if Purdy doesn't play well? If Purdy doesn't play well, guess what? He deserves the same evaluation as if another quarterback doesn't play well. Why? I don't care about the health anymore. The health questions were off the field after the first week of training camp. Even with the pitch count restriction, the 49ers were operating this entire time as if he was on, that throwing program. But every day he's out there, he's 100%, he's healthy. And so to me personally, if he doesn't play well, you still have to, hold him accountable for his mistakes. Now, does that mean that Brock Purdy's job is at all in jeopardy? No. He is the week 1 unquestioned starter, and it likely will require an injury or significantly poor play from Purdy over about a 6 to 8 week period for a quarterback change to happen. I think Purdy's job is as secure as possible, to the point where Kyle Shanahan said he'll have to melt in in training camp in order for him not to start. His job is secure, but that doesn't mean you don't hold him accountable for his actions just because it's preseason or just because of the injury issues. I think both of those have been debunked.
I think it's crazy because, so I'm going to go through some comments real quick because some of the comments deserve some love. I do agree TDP was pretty bad in pass pro. I do agree with that. Alex Holden says, well, I sure hope the 49ers don't play any players just to make the fan base feel better. I don't think it's making the fan base feel better. I think you gotta put some players out there in order to see what they really are. Like, in the sense of not necessarily what they really are, but to get them game reps. Like, if everyone's saying don't be concerned over practice interceptions, okay, then let them practice in a game like setting, which is a preseason. So then we don't have to be concerned because he won't throw interceptions in the preseason. So it doesn't matter, right? Right? So I don't know. But I wanted to go through some of Tab Dushadoo's comments. Keep Brock off the field, he'll kill it in pit. That sounds like pretty bold statement. Trey has something to show. Brock doesn't need to prove anything. Brock's played 7 games, got hurt in his, I believe, 8th game. His 7th start towards UCL. Has thrown a lot of interceptions in practice. He has a lot to prove. He hasn't done nothing in terms of show he is a franchise guy yet. 7 games isn't enough. 4 games is not enough for Trey Lance. I think every quarterback on this roster has something to prove. Sam Darnold as well. And then he ends with, and I think this was a shot at Suneil, who said he doesn't think there's a franchise. It was Suneil. Suneil looked up real quick, so I know Suneil about to fire back. Put his phone down. He's ready for this. This is a shot at you. He goes, LOL, all caps. Brock's numbers last year were historic, yet he's not good enough. I don't know about historic, but go ahead, Suneil.
Yeah, and once again,
well, first of all, wait, Suneil, I'll just put some context so that you can put them on blast after this. I'm assuming the only two historic
Rohan does this, Rohan's serious. So you just awoken the beast.
The only 2 historic things that Brock Purdy produced last year was the touchdowns in a row. I believe he had 2 touchdowns per game for 6 or 7 games in a row, and then the wins for a for a 7th round quarterback. The consecutive wins in a row, and also him starting. The numbers itself weren't historic. It was the storyline that was historic and certain accolades that were historic. If you look at the numbers in terms of passing yards per game, nowhere near historic, nowhere near eclipsing Justin Herbert's, rookie years. If you look at the touchdowns per game, not touchdowns per game, the overall touchdowns, not historic. If you look at even, you could look at different advanced statistics too, turnover-worthy play rate, all sorts of different statistics. The only 2 numbers you're going to find that are historic was that touchdown, where he had 2 touchdowns in about 7 games in a row, I believe, and also the fact that, he won the number of games that he did as a rookie starting quarterback where he was drafted. Suneil, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm not here to flame you, Tab, because I did see some of your other comments when it comes to, why didn't Sam Darnold look a certain way when CMC was over there. But to me, when I say none of these quarterbacks are franchise quarterbacks, I think we have to define what a franchise quarterback is. To me, a franchise quarterback isn't necessarily somebody that's the starting quarterback for a long time. I'm looking at those elite quarterbacks that elevate the play, where you can put the game on their shoulders and consistently feel like I have a chance to win this game. And I don't think any of these quarterbacks that we have right now are that or have proven that yet. They possibly can. Look, Brock Purdy and Trey Lance are extremely young. So they have nothing but upside to be able to develop into those type of players. The historic offense, quote unquote, and I think we look at that because the 49ers scoring by far went up, especially when Brock Purdy was there. Once again, I would attribute that more to CMC being fully integrated into the offense mixed with Kyle Shanahan's system, which is why we didn't see Sam Darnold look that way with CMC, because he didn't have Kyle Shanahan calling the plays there, more than what Brock Purdy was actually doing as a quarterback. Now, not to say that Brock Purdy wasn't doing anything good. His elusiveness was great. His decision-making to a point was good. And I think he elevated the play of a guy like George Kittle, who obviously started, being way more effective when Brock Purdy was there as a quarterback. But once again, when I'm trying to say, who do I give credit to for why the offense looks much better, I would say Brock Purdy is lower on that list than a CMC and a Kyle Shanahan. That's the point that I was trying to make.
This guy's a hater. Dude, don't listen to Suneil, dude. He was historic. He was historic. Dude threw for 220 yards, 220 passing yards per game. Oh my geez, this guy was, if you want to include every game, because if I'm going off of starts, it's 216, 220. If you include every game he played, which means you include the Dolphins game and you include his playoff games, it's around 228 or so. That's historic, dude. Dude, what he did was magnificent. Asking the defense to get him an extra turnover a game so he could turn 26.5 points per game that Jimmy Garoppolo was doing to 33 points a game. Dude, you're a hater, all right? Straight up. 228 passing yards per game. That's historic for a 49ers quarterback, bro. We haven't seen play like that before, ever. All right? He's the real deal. He's the best quarterback we've had since you can name it. All right? Stop hating on my franchise quarterback, Suneil. Don't ever do that again.
You can name it. Marco meant Jimmy Garoppolo in 2019.
Damn.
Oh, man.
Damn.
Yeah, but I don't know. Do you guys agree with me on the take that
I
CMC
agree.
is the real reason, like,
I don't think
why the offense looked
Oh,
good?
absolutely.
I would go further though. Like if what the defense did, and I was saying this last year on the show all the time. Like what the defense was doing was that's what was historic. What the defense did was historic.
That is very true.
Like,
the defense really was the game changer because not only did they generate more turnovers, they also gave the 49ers much better field position on very specific drives that accounted for the 49ers scoring points. Those were the two big factors. Them generating positive field position for the 49ers. I'm pretty sure if you look at Brock Purdy in that Tampa Bay game, I forget exactly if it's that. I think it was. He had 4 drives that started like inside Tampa Bay territory or something like that. It was some crazy stat. And overall, I mean, the defense really did well over that, that stretch of games. And we also heard all the, they shut out teams in the second half, all those type of statistics for how many ever games it was in the second half of the year as well.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And real quick, before we continue, I want to go ahead and say prayers out to, I believe, Tyree Cleveland, who just got injured during the preseason game. Looks like he landed seriously on his neck, got carted off on a stretcher. Hope everything is okay. Prayers out to him. Never like seeing a player go out on a stretcher, especially when it's a head and neck injury. So prayers out to him. Hope everything is well. End of the day, football is family. At the end of the day, even though it's another team, football is family. So prayers out to him. Really hope he's okay. At the end of the day, that's the main thing is players' health. So going forward, I know we wanted to talk quarterbacks and stuff like that. I want to see preseason stuff and all that, but it's wild to me. And I wanted to ask you guys. I know this was part of the conversation that we wanted to have. Do you guys think the media is being a little too harsh or too crazy when it comes to Trey Lance? And I want to start it off. I'll start it off with Rohan right now, and then we'll go to Suneil. Do you guys think what the media is doing, and you guys can name drop people? I'm not going to name drop anyone until it comes to Michael Lombardi, who I think is a damn clown.
Well, that was going to be the first one that I name dropped.
And I wasn't going to name drop anyone else, but he's a clown. But you guys can go ahead and continue.
It's interesting. I didn't really think Michael I mean, I'm not too tuned into national media. I didn't really think Michael Lombardi would say something like that until he said how when his mama picked him up from the crib, he had no quarterback instinct. The undertone in that statement just not great. But overall, here's what I say: did Trey Lance's performance this past weekend, you know, did it was it to the point where when you hear national media talk about it in a poor way, is that justified? In my personal opinion, yes. I didn't think Trey Lance played well this year. I did not think that he played that well in this game. I graded him at a D plus. I felt maybe a tad bit better after watching the film, but still didn't think it was an amazing game. But the point to me isn't isolating this one game. The point to me is national media takes one game without context and then moves it into a direct statement on a player's career or something that is on a much bigger scope. And that's where you might take an issue where you see a lot more negativity towards Trey Lance specifically in that kind of area. Now, if you're isolating one game, you can maybe make a statement. But overall, do I think the national media has been more harsh on Lance than other quarterbacks, given the situation and given the context? Yeah, absolutely. And I honestly think the best way for Trey Lance to absolve himself of the way national media talks about him is a new location. Now, do I think that happens this season? No, I don't think the 49ers move him. First of all, if he wins the quarterback 2 job, they keep him as good insurance because that's what they want. If he loses the quarterback 2 job, they don't trade him because he doesn't have trade value. So I don't think he gets moved this offseason, but I also think that that's the best way for him to absolve himself and really start to come into a shell because right now it is Brock Purdy's team. However, about the original question on media, I do think that I do think they overblow it, and I do think that it's been a little more harsh. And obviously, the cherry on top was what Michael Lombardi said.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that it's been terrible, to be honest, Marco. I personally feel so bad for Trey because of how the national media has somehow picked him as the guy this offseason that they want to go out consistently. And you named, a name. I want to name drop somebody. Colin Cowherd, to me, uses any little bit of down on Trey Lance and like goes after it. Now, obviously, we all kind of have heard the rumors about possibly, it could be something with his daughter. And
I almost commented on that on Twitter. I almost tweeted him on Twitter earlier today when I did see him make that comment. I'm like, bro, we all know why you're making the comments because you think your daughter thought he was big too, dog.
Yeah.
Like pause, but like
yeah, and so I'm really disappointed with Colin Cowherd, and honestly, for me, watching how the national media, now that we're kind of way more plugged in to 49ers, with you, especially Marco, with your connections and just watching it more closely, doing content with Rohan and guys like Jesse and stuff like that, seeing what we really see and what we know about the team, and then seeing how the national media creates stories around this team makes me just not trust anything I hear from the national media about narratives when it comes to certain players, even on other teams. Because if they could blow out of proportion Trey Lance and treat Trey Lance the way that they're treating Trey Lance, they could do this with any player that we just aren't as tapped in because we don't know the beat writers and we're not paying attention to all the practices and the interviews and things like that. So yeah, I think anybody that doesn't see Trey Lance being harshly criticized, and the bigger point to me is the 49ers have been very clear who QB1 is. When have you ever seen a backup quarterback get criticized the way that Trey Lance is being criticized? This is something that's personal with the media, whether it be personal with the actual player, which it seems like with Colin Cowherd, or maybe a guy like Matt Mayoko or Adam Schefter, who's gone out of his way to say certain things about Trey as well, or elevate a guy like Sam Darnold. Like a shot at the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan for making these guys feel stupid when it came to that draft where he let everybody kind of run with the story that Mac Jones was going to be the pick instead of Trey Lance. I don't know what the reason is, but I've never seen a backup quarterback get this much airtime, one, and then negative airtime on top of that.
I absolutely agree. I do think it stems back to Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch letting the media heads run with they traded up for Mac Jones, especially because Kyle Shanahan comes out and like laughs at their face. Like we were laughing in the everywhere we were, and we would see, look, these guys think we're taking Mac Jones. We would just laugh. Like we thought it was really funny. We just thought to let them go on with it. Not our job to fix it. Well, one, I say Michael Lombardi's a clown, absolutely clown. To say, so you're telling me you walked up to your kids and you picked up, if he has kids. I mean, I don't know what lady would want to be with him, but you're telling me you walked up, if you had kids, you walked up to your kids, you picked them up right away, you knew what the fuck they were going to be. Excuse my language. No. Like, we know why you're doing this. We know the underlying reasoning of why you're doing this. Like, don't be stupid. Colin Cowherd comes out and says stupid shit to you. It's because he left your daughter, dude. Him and your daughter were hooking up. He left your daughter, and you got mad about it. You freaking loved the guy when he was with your daughter. You said he was probably the best quarterback in the draft during draft season. Like, come on now, don't do that. You look like a clown as well.
Now, I do want to point out a different avenue, and it's with a completely different pretense. But I've seen two similar reports from. One is a radio show host. One is a beat writer. Mike Silver and Greg Papa have both pointed out the 49ers seem to be preferring Sam Darnold. And, I mean, you can make an argument for it. Gotten more reps, obviously, this week. And it's a 50-50 split in terms of game reps. They seem to be preferring Sam Darnold, which obviously leads to the case of Lance being expendable. But other avenues, they've also said where they don't necessarily believe Lance will be moved. What do you think about that type of reasoning?
I mean, I get that. I mean, if you're going to talk about quarterback 2 and 3 play, like, that's totally understandable. They're not going above and beyond. They're like, oh, when he was a kid, his mom pissed. Like, to me, that's stupid. Or to make fun of his character like Colin Cowherd did and use a dude who's on Twitter as a fake NFL scout, former NFL scout. Like, come on, bro. Like, to me, that was like a slap in the face to actual NFL scouts when Colin Cowherd using that. But like, I don't mind Matt Miyoko and Mike Silver talking about, well, I think they prefer, like, okay, if you hearing that, that's cool. Speak what you're hearing. Like, I don't mind that. But it's interesting because wouldn't you think if they were leaning Sam Darnold, wouldn't they play Sam Darnold last week if that was their quarterback too? Like, I mean, wouldn't you play him first, right? Like, I get like, oh, maybe you want to showcase Trey Lance first, so you could probably try to move him earlier. But I don't see that. Like, I think if you look at it, Trey, I believe, had more reps during training camp than Sam Darnold.
Might have been even, but yeah. And it's interesting because Mayoko himself, right, he pointed out that it just tells the situation's very fluid. Mayoko himself pointed out that at the beginning of training camp, he would have given the edge to Darnold, which personally I thought was interesting because I thought it'd be more so for the guy who was in the system for longer. But he also said at the end of camp, he'd give the edge to Lance. And now, obviously, based on this past week, which Kyle Shanahan, in retrospect, did say this past week was going to be very important. The joint practices and the preseason game
but he didn't
was
mean
going
it,
to be.
though. He didn't mean it.
Agreed.
He didn't mean it.
Agreed.
Because if you really thought that the joint practice was this important, if you really thought the joint practice was more important than the preseason games, you would have not had your first team go up against their first team. Well, you have the defense sit there and watch, and the second team. You would have had first team and first team, second team and second team, like most teams do at joint practice. Kyle Shanahan, don't bullshit me. When you were in Minnesota,
but I do think that it was more important, but more important for the starters.
Yes, but no. But if you're trying to, the main battle isn't the starting position; it's the QB2 position, right? Like if I get,
but that's what the preseason.
But
game's
you could,
for.
but no, the thing is though, is you could have, for example, when they were in Minnesota and they were, and then they also did the Chargers a few years ago. When they did their joint practices, they let the ones go against the ones. Kyle was there watching. They also had on the other side field the twos and the twos. They're going at it at the same time. Like, why are you doing ones, letting your team sit there for a very long time? Like, the defense isn't getting reps. You could get the defense more reps, and you could have more film on all these players going into these preseason games and whatnot. I get you're trying to take care of them, but at the end of the day, you're trying to watch to see who's better to make the roster. Kyle, he's done it before, so I know it's not something he doesn't do. So for me, I'm like, do you really care about the preseason? Do you really care about what do you care about? Because if you cared about it, you would have got your twos reps during that joint practice. So that, I don't know.
And Rohan, to your point, about who's leaning which way and leaning whatever way. I mean, I don't know. Like, we never know. We're only going to know if Kyle Shanahan says anything, which we know he probably won't till he's made a decision. But I think it goes back to my point that none of these guys have really separated themselves in any way, shape, or form. So it's like, I think that Kyle Shanahan, it's like wishful thinking. I don't think he necessarily thinks one of these guys is going to take it by the horns and run with it, but he's giving the opportunity to everyone to like separate yourself, right? And I think that's where the frustration with some of the fan base is like, they call it wasted reps because they're looking at it from a perspective of their favorite player, whether it be Trey Lance, that guy should be getting all the reps, right? Whether it be Sam Darnold, that guy should be getting all the reps. But I think Kyle Shanahan's perspective is not from I'm like hoping this player does it or this player does it or that. I think he's just like, I need to know who can do it. I'm going to give everybody those reps. Who's going to separate themselves? And I think what we've seen from this quarterback battle is none of these guys have separated themselves. I don't think Brock Purdy has looked that much better than a Sam Darnold or Trey Lance, whatever order you put them in. It's like all of them huddled right there where it's just maybe preference that you're deciding why you like this quarterback over that quarterback. And I think that's probably the main reason why there's all of these reports about it could be Sam Darnold or this or that, because none of them have separated themselves.
And what's crazy, I want to add to what Rohan said earlier too, how he said Matt Mayoko came out and said, and the leader for that spot was initially Sam Darnold. Now it's Trey Lance. Not only did Mayoko do that, but Adam Schefter did that earlier today too. And no one wants to talk about that because it doesn't fit their narrative that QB2 Sam Darnold, right? Like, it's one of those ones where everyone was hush on it because they all want a Trey to fail. Like, a lot of people want him to fail. He went on like a little thing where he was like, well, initially it was Sam, but they really like how, and he said they really like how Trey Lance has looked throughout training camp. He looked really good. He might be number 2 right now. I'm not counting him out. So it's like, how can they go from being confirmed? Both of those guys were like, oh, he's traded. He's QB3. They brought Sam Darnold in to trade Trey Lance, and now they're like, wait, he might be QB2. So I'm confused. Like, I don't know. I've always thought he was QB2. I think the media is being a little too critical, especially certain guys. And I would even go on to say, what's that dude who's on ESPN, Rohan? Quarterback.
Quarterback.
No, he's a quarterback.
Orlovsky?
Orlovsky.
He went on and said he believes they should trade Trey. That's a fair take, but he went on and said how he doesn't know what Brock Purdy is yet, right? So this is exact quote. He was like, I don't know what Brock Purdy is yet. But then the next question they asked him was, do you think Brock Purdy could lead the 49ers to the Super Bowl? And he was like, absolutely. He's the real deal. He's really good. You just got done saying you don't know what he is yet because he doesn't have enough game. Yet you're saying he's good enough to win the 49ers Super Bowl. Like, make it make sense. Like, it's either you know what he is after 7 games, you think he knows what he is, and you know he could lead us to the Super Bowl, or you don't know what he is yet. Like, to me, I think you can't say you don't know what someone is, but then say, yeah, he's going to lead them to the Super Bowl. Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. And do you guys agree that, so obviously we know Brock Purdy's QB1, right? But let's say it's a tie between Trey Lance and Sam Darnold. Do you guys agree with me that that tie will go to Trey Lance just because of youth, how long he's been in the system, and then obviously what they've invested?
I would assume so. The NFL works like that. I would assume so.
Now, I will say this, and I forget where I saw it on Twitter, but I agree with this. Honestly, it does not matter because for the backups, that's one where you don't really have to declare who your top backup is until they come in and play.
Giving the guy the credit who said it, Brian Rennick. I believe that's who you saw.
There we go. I forget who it was, but I saw this when I was scrolling on Twitter. I mean, I agree with that point. I agree with that point. And overall, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, because the only true indicator you're going to get as to who they trust is who comes out if Purdy gets injured. And the other thing is, it's likely going to be the guy who they believe currently has the higher floor, not the higher ceiling, especially if the injury is not that long term. And so that'll be also a portion of the battle as well.
I agree. It doesn't matter who the backup is. I think even if Sam Darnold was to be named QB2 to start the season, I think they would put Trey in to play games prior to Sam Darnold. You have invest, and this would be even from coming from higher up. Like, hey, why the hell did you invest? Yet you've only seen 4 games of him play him. Like, right? Like,
I think the one thing when it comes to these narratives and stuff that I think a lot of the fan base are disappointed on is just the fact that the team hasn't stepped in and at least on camera in front of everybody, right? We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, what kind of conversations they're having with some of these media personalities behind the scenes, because you have seen some of their takes change immediately, right? So clearly that's something that the 49ers have probably stepped in and done. But I think some of the fan base wants Kyle Shanahan, Lynch, York, or whomever, do what Raheem Mostert did, right? Where he just jumped out and was like, yo, like, pretty much like stop going at my guy type of thing. And even guys on the team haven't really done that. And it could be because the 49ers as a whole just don't love the media, right? I don't think they want to play into the narratives or give them anything other than what they are obligated to do. But I think that's a little bit of a frustration. And even me, like, that's realistic about it. I'm a big Trey Lance guy, but I know he's not going to be the starter. And I also know he hasn't necessarily proved himself to where we can sit there and anoint him as a franchise quarterback.
absolutely.
But I've also feel like, just as from a human and have your players back, you got to say something with when a Mayoko's doing what he's doing, when a Colin Cowherd is doing what he's doing. I feel like the team should come out and kind of nip some of this stuff in the bud, because it is crazy. I'm sure it's hard for Trey to have to deal with these narratives and get text messages from his friends and, family that are probably hearing this type of stuff. I don't know. What do you guys think about that as far as, and Marco, maybe you can answer first because I know you're really tapped into the team. What do you get a sense of? Either are they paying attention or do they just don't care?
So I commented on I forgot who it was, but they posted something about, oh, why do you guys think Kyle Shanahan knows? He was asked a question like, hey, what do you think about the comments about Trey Lance not having the QB instance? And someone's like, how do you know he knew what he was talking about? Bro, they have a PR system. They have a PR team that tells the head coach, tells the general manager what is going on, what is being said by national media, what is being said by fans. They pay attention. Like, they have a PR team for a reason. Could Kyle Shanahan had addressed it when he was asked? Absolutely. He could have been like, hey, you know what? I don't agree with that take. I believe my young quarterback has been phenomenal this offseason. Think he played well. Or he could have just did exactly what he did, brushed it off. Like, that's what they usually do with the media. They're not a big media group. And they haven't been a big media group since Kyle Shanahan's gotten to the 49ers. The reason is media spins things. Media is gonna do whatever they have to do to generate views. They're called an entertainment system for a reason. They're there to entertain fans, not to give 100% the truth. They're not going to do that. So, like, that's why you see guys like Michael Lombardi, Adam Schefter, and other people go on these rants about certain players, because it draws great viewership to their channels. If you look at the 49er fan base, it's one of the biggest fan bases in all of football. If they talk negative about a player, they're going to get majority of the fan base to view their stuff. That's what it is. I don't think – now, do I think Kyle should have spoke up? I think he should have. Now, I understand why he didn't. Brock's a strong guy. Brock mentally is capable of handling it. Brock knows how to handle it. He did it since he got drafted. And I guarantee you Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have spoken to Trey Lance to let him know, don't worry about it.
And I'll say this, just speaking from a firsthand perspective where I evaluate my views on articles and see truly what sticks and what doesn't. it is much clearer that the negative articles that I've written are much more standing out compared to the positive. And it sometimes is in the vicinity of 5x, 6x, because guess what? Negativity is something that a fan base, especially as big as the 49ers, eats up. And you don't see these type of comments maybe going against, a Jacksonville Jaguars or one of the teams with not as big of a fan base. I'm not saying anything against them, but you'll see more of these comments directed towards the 49ers.
Absolutely.
You'll see more of these comments toward you hear about the Dallas Cowboys a lot. You'll probably hear about, the big market teams. You'll see more of these comments because that's where the views are generated, and the negativity brings in a ton more views. So that's probably, a good portion of why you hear the comments that you hear.
Negativity in social in the media world is such a big thing that if you pay attention to the Mahomes, right, like the Mahomes little brother and his wife, when Mahomes was playing in the championship games, his playoffs and everything, they weren't even talking about Mahomes' play on the field, but rather they were talking about his wife and his brother in the stands. Like that's how much negativity runs the media side of things. Like
Yeah,
so,
it's
like
TMZ, TMZ Sports.
exactly. Like for example, if you look at TV shows, if you were to put on like a TV show that is super boring, super straightforward, like the people do everything good no matter what, you're not going to get views. But if you put on like a Jersey Shore, they go viral as shit because what they're doing the outlandish, and like that's why you see a lot of these media TV shows or like NFL Network bringing on ex NFL players because they know how to talk their shit. That's what it is. Like they know how to talk their shit. That's what exactly why they're bringing on these NFL players and guys that could rally up fans and get them engaged. That's how I see it at least.
No, definitely. All right, guys, it's been a fun show today. We've had a lot of fun because it's the first time in a while we've done a 3-person show. We had Suneil on, wanted to get him back on the channel. It's been a minute. And then we obviously had Marco on. Any last comments before we head on out of here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just as a fan base, realize that pay attention to how you felt the same time last season. It's probably pretty similar. And then pay attention to how you felt throughout the actual season. And, just move accordingly is all I have to say.
So my last comments would be: make sure you guys subscribe to everyone on this channel today, on this show today. Make sure you go to every channel, subscribe. Tomorrow I should be on with Josh Harper, ex-NFL player with the Las Vegas Raiders, former Fresno State legend. Probably will have him on every Friday on the show from here on out. So you don't want to miss what he has to say. Great guy, great content, great understanding of the game of football. So make sure you guys subscribe so you guys get some of that as well. Rohan, Suneil, appreciate you guys for being on. Make sure you guys subscribe to their channel. They bring quality content every time they're on.
Yes, sir. We'll see you guys next time.